everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I have regularly been posting videos here on YouTube, yarn dyeing videos, since I think about September 2017. However, my first yarn dyeing video ever is much older than that, many apartments ago. And so I thought it would be fun to take a look back at my earliest yarn dyeing videos, which were all based on food coloring, react to them, cringe to them, and see what I think and if I would do the same thing or what I might do differently today. But before I get started, please make sure you are subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. Here we are at my YouTube channel. And it just occurred to me that something else that could be really interesting to do would be to go back and react to the very first episode of Dye Pot Weekly. This is only we're approaching 5.5 years old, but even so, I would go and do that first project completely differently now, I am sure. But oh my gosh, a lot of these, even this one is so old, 10 years ago. We're going back that far. All right, let's go to my videos. And you used to be able to sort everything here by like newest upload and not just the most recent upload. I'm now curious if that's the same on mobile. We're gonna have to look. No, we can only do recent uploads and popular. That is a shame. But okay, I'm gonna have to pull up the videos a different way because we can only look at recent uploads and then popular. And there are some dyeing videos under some of my most popular things, like this Kool-Aid one. But a lot of these, and some Breaking Violet. That is something I'm known for, but a lot of my most popular videos are some of the knitting tutorials I've done. But now, let's start listening. Oh no.
Hello, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'm here with allfreeknitting.com to talk to you today about dyeing yarn.
Okay, so first of all, the intro was a little bit different. This is Rebecca from ChemKnits. And the reason why I started having that type of intro at all was that I was making these videos in partnership with another website. And part of the agreement at the time was that I would post them onto my channel and they would post them onto their channel at the same time. Gosh, how old is this video? This video is from March 25th, 2011. So this is a pretty old video. And yeah, because I was going to be having content that was going to be posted on another channel as well, I think I was paid like $10 or $15 a video back then. But I retained rights to it. I retained the rights. And so it was not exclusive rights that I gave them. But the funny thing about all of this is that it encouraged me to make more videos. And I wanted to make sure I identified myself in the video because if they were sharing the video on their website or whatever, I wanted people to know who I was and to try to come find me. Because at the time, ChemKnits was very much a hobby, but also it was mostly my written blog, my written website versus the YouTube channel that we have now. So anyway, that's partially how I started making videos. I did actually make some videos before even this, some other knitting tutorials because I wanted to have a clip to show how to do a particular stitch on my website. And YouTube was a way to just embed a video. But anyway, the resolution is low, the aspect ratio. I think I filmed this probably on like an old Canon PowerShot, like one of the pretty old point and shoot cameras.
When we do this tutorial today, we're going to be using 1 packet of sugar-free Kool-Aid, and this happens to be a tropical punch flavor, so we should get a pink or red color. And we are also using some undyed 100% wool that is in fingering weight, and I've used this chair to wrap it into a skein.
You could see like a little chair over in the back. Over back here where I have the full skein. I believe that this must have been Knit Picks palette. And I've referenced this before because when I started making these videos, I wasn't eligible for any money on YouTube back then. And so I wasn't getting paid very much to make the videos in the first place. And so 1 skein of yarn, 100 grams of palette, maybe it was $6 or $7. I wanted it to stretch as far as possible so I could use it in as many videos as possible. And so that's why I'm making a mini skein here.
And so to help prevent the yarn from getting tangled, I am going to lightly tie the ends of the yarn around the skein like so, but I don't want to pull tight because we don't want to end up with white marks where the ties are.
You should do more than 2 ties. I am guilty of not putting on extra ties still, but you should add more. You should add more.
But these ties should help hold the skein in place, and we are ready to start the dyeing process. Before we begin the dyeing process, we want to pre-soak the yarn. In this glass, there is just plain tap water.
Okay, so this is the first apartment where I ever lived with Keith. I love that here in the back you can see a Cheerios box. I wonder if that's a Costco size one. We also, I think it must be on like a little mini Gorilla Pod tripod, so it's only like this big. And so the angles are awkward. If I had a tripod on the floor, then I would be able to get a better top-down view. But oh my gosh, the stove, it's so old. Oh, I miss that apartment, actually.
While the yarn is soaking, we can start setting up our dye bath.
Mm-hmm.
In this standard kitchen pot, I have added 2 cups of water, and I'm going to empty the contents of our Kool-Aid packet into that water. I'll show you, it's a nice bright cherry red color.
Okay, you can see the mess. That must have been the recycling pile. Oh my gosh. It was a small, like, galley kitchen, a tiny refrigerator. Oh dear. But yeah, you can see the video making process is not what I would do today. And even today, there are things that I should improve. But one thing that I didn't talk about here yet was what you need to dye yarn with food coloring. So artificial food coloring can be used to dye yarn that is a protein-based fiber. So the 100% non-superwash wool I'm using in this video is a great candidate, as would superwash wool, alpaca, silk, those things would work. You do need acid in order to dye the yarn, but there's citric acid in the Kool-Aid, and so that's enough acid. And then you need to add heat. And so when you combine all those, you can dye your yarn. And none of those things are things that I talked about here. Maybe I will in a moment.
And using, any kind of spoon or anything, just going to stir this up.
I don't like it. Hopefully editing Rebecca will reduce the volume of this. It is so loud.
Now, one of the fun things about dyeing yarn with Kool-Aid is that it also smells really good. So I'm going to turn the stove on at a low and put it to a low heat because I want the dye bath to simmer. As we're waiting for this to heat up, it's worth mentioning that the components that we need in order to dye yarn with Kool-Aid.
I did do it. I should have said this earlier, but it sounds like I'm going to say what I shared here.
Are acid, which we get in the form of, guess you can't see it, of citric acid, which is one of the main ingredients of the Kool-Aid mix.
I love showing the blurry thing, acknowledging that you can't see it. I could have taken a picture and inserted it in. I don't remember what software I used for editing back then, but I just basically stitched all the clips together. Crudely.
The second component is heat, which we get from the stove. And then the third component is wool, which we have soaking in water right back here. Now this process you can do with some wool acrylic blends, but you need to have some kind of animal fiber in order for this method of dyeing.
The first yarn that I ever dyed with Kool-Aid was 80% acrylic, 20% wool. So that stands. One other thing I love is that I don't know how much yarn I'm going to be dyeing. I did not have a scale at the time. I think a lot of these minis I dyed way back when were between 3 and 5 grams.
To work. All right, so the dye bath is now slightly simmering. So I am going to take the yarn out from where it was drying, gently squeeze out a little of the water, but that's not super crucial, and dip it into the dye bath. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is since you're dyeing 100% wool, you do not, I repeat, you do not want to stir the pot, because if you stir the pot too much or really at all, you risk felting your yarn and then...
No. You don't want to start too much. You don't want to agitate the fiber too much, but you definitely can stir non-superwash yarn some. You can touch it some when it's in the warm dye bath without things felting. Yes, there are some yarn lines that are more prone to felting than others, so there's some where you would be much more likely to see some felting after the fact, but you can stir this. In fact, I think I have another early video of me trying to felt an oven mitt and showing just how much agitation to really turn it into a felted piece of fabric. And so you can touch it a bit. In fact, I recommend you touch it a bit.
And not being able to use it. Instead, if you want to check the progress, you can pull the yarn out gently.
I mean, Rebecca, you're touching it, you're moving it. But also, Palette is a yarn that is wonderful for doing color work. It's 100% non-superwash Peruvian Highland wool. And it does tend to like stick to itself a little bit. It's a little grippy. And so that is something I've seen through the dyeing process with it, but it's not quite felted. It's just sticky or grippy.
And then put it back in. Another thing I guess I'll mention, since you can see, I'm wearing gloves. I've dyed yarn with Kool-Aid enough times that I have accidentally also turned my fingers red. So sometimes it is handy to protect your fingers.
It's possible that this yarn went into my ladybug design. I used to design patterns, and I have some free patterns on my website. But yeah, always wearing the purple gloves.
And I will come back in a little bit and we'll check on the progress of our yarn. So the yarn has been simmering in the dye bath for a while.
I did not say how long. It would be very helpful to say how long. And I have a feeling when I was filming this, I'm like, why is there still some color here? It's because there's not very much fiber.
And as you might see, the dye bath has lightened considerably, and most of the dye has absorbed to the yarn, which is becoming this really deep, let's see if I can grab it, deep cherry red. Now, we don't really want to shock the yarn, so I'm going to turn off the heat. And even though the dye bath is still hot, I'm going to leave it here to cool until I can handle the yarn comfortably, and that's when we will wash it.
Oh no, I think that the part where I might cringe is going to come. I'm really nervous.
And while we're waiting for the yarn to cool, I want to mention that kitchen safety is important when you're dealing with dyeing yarn, and you should never leave the dye bath unattended.
I mean, I suppose, like, you want to make sure that you're paying, good attention to the kitchen. Now, in general, when you're talking about kitchen safety, if I'm using Kool-Aid or food coloring to dye yarn, I am personally comfortable using kitchen equipment and tools to do that. But if I'm using any commercial dyes, I will be using dedicated dye equipment that is never used for the preparation of food.
All right, so the yarn has now cooled to a point where I can handle it comfortably. As you see, I'll stick my hand straight in the dye bath. And the water may have cleared a little bit more from when we were using it before. Now I'm going to carefully take my yarn over to the sink.
My sink is full of dishes.
Where I have a
bath
of lukewarm water running. And I'm going to stick the yarn into this bath.
You do want to match the temperature of your yarn to the rinse, but I want this to be done
with a little bit of dish soap to help clean it off. And as you notice, this bright red yarn is sitting in this water, and the water is taking none of the pink color at all. So this means that the dye has done a very good job of adhering to the yarn, and that we are not likely to stain anything by using this yarn.
Maybe it's a good thing that you can't just sort from oldest videos easily anymore. Yeah, maybe I don't want people to be able to do that. Oh my gosh.
Occasionally, when you have too much dye in your dye bath, you will see some color coming out of the yarn. Don't be alarmed. This is perfectly normal. And just wash the yarn with a tiny bit of soap and water until the rinse water that you're rinsing it in runs clean and you have completely rinsed out the soap. And voila!
Hey, I showed the dry yarn in the first video. Maybe. At least it's drying if it's not dry. But hey, I'm impressed.
Here is our bright red yarn hanging to dry. You can see I'm not even afraid to touch it with my hands because I'm not going to get any color on them. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial on how to dye yarn with Kool-Aid. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and this video has been brought to you by my friends at allfreeknitting.com.
Yay! Yay! Okay, let's watch one more because I'm curious how similar and different they are. I did pull up 2 videos, but we'll just do this one, which is, I think, probably filmed at the same time. But, oh, it looks like, okay, I haven't watched this in so long. I'm really excited.
Hello, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and with my friends from allfreeknitting.com, today we're going to show you a tutorial on how to dye yarn with food coloring.
Yay! Okay, so the food coloring on the top is ancient food coloring that I don't remember if it was my grandmother's or my mother's, but one of them gave it to me, and yeah, I definitely, was that some of the first violet? I don't know. I feel like the first violet, I had a container of Woodlands Violet. I went and I bought that, maybe. I don't remember why I bought it, or if I had, maybe it was used, it's possible I was using a violet from here. The McCormick's Neon. It is a kit that I loved. Now that I'm like thinking about it, it's because like that neon blue is just the blue one. I'm getting ahead of myself. I love the neon kit. And then this is just a generic one. But ultimately, all food coloring in the US has the same few molecules, but the ancient set may have some things that aren't approved anymore. I don't know. I don't still have that.
The type of food coloring that you can use can be anything from liquid food colorings to even very old paste food colorings. The other items that we will need to dye this yarn are a heat source, and I'm going to use a pot on the stove, some water and wool yarn, and I'm going to just pre-soak the wool in the water so that way it will allow the dye to absorb more evenly.
Okay, I think we missed it, but there was like a little spot down here that I think was from the previous video.
And the final component after heat, color, and yarn is acid. And as the acid source to let the dye adhere to the yarn properly, we're going to use some white vinegar in our dye bath.
I think this is the same pot I used previously. And is there a little bit of red I didn't clean? I did start with fresh water, I'm pretty sure.
On low heat on the stove. And I want to reiterate that you should never leave your cooking yarn unattended.
I mean, I suppose you don't want to burn the yarn or have the dye go down. I mean, I never leave my pots like super unattended. I'm always on the same floor. I'm not sure where this was coming from. Maybe it's because I was afraid that it would burn or something. But so, yeah, keeping a good close eye on anything you have cooking in general is a really good idea.
To the dye bath, I'm going to add some of the vinegar. I'm going to add...
You couldn't see that.
It's not super important. For this batch, I'm going to add a tablespoon of vinegar per cup of water.
Oh my gosh, that is so much acid. I would use 1 tablespoon of vinegar per 8 cups of water. Maybe 2 to 3, but 1 to 1, that's a lot of acid and way more than you need.
The dye bath. So I'm adding 2 tablespoons of vinegar.
There's only 2 cups of water in there? Wow.
The amount that you need to add is not by any means exact, and you can actually, after the color is gone, reuse the same dye bath multiple times. And I'm just going to stir this up to distribute the vinegar that is our acid source. I am wearing latex gloves. It's just to protect my fingers from color.
Those weren't latex gloves. I never wore latex gloves. Those are nitrile gloves. I definitely misspoke.
Not because anything we're dealing with is dangerous. Everything that we're dealing with are things that you can commonly find in your kitchen. And I think today I feel like trying to make some blue yarn. So because sometimes you might want to try to reproduce the color of yarn that you want, it's handy to count the number of drops that you add. But just like you would check a dye lot on any yarn that you buy, don't count on reproducing a color, so try to dye as much yarn as you'll need for your project.
Yeah, because I think one thing I didn't consider was the amount of yarn, and then I wasn't measuring the amount of yarn. I liked how the first video I showed how I made the mini skein. This one I didn't. We just sort of jumped in. But yeah, this is a random blue. I think I got it at a Christmas tree store or something.
The first time around. So I'm not really bothering to count here. I'm just adding. So I'm adding a ton of blue.
That is so much. That is so much food coloring for 3 to 5 grams of yarn. I mean, to be fair, this is a off-brand, and so it's probably not as potent as, say, even McCormick's, or certainly not as potent as, say, Wilton Color-Right. With Wilton's Color-Right, I might do 20 to 30 drops per 100 grams of yarn. With McCormick's, maybe 60 or so drops. So maybe it's not that much, but yikes.
Normally, for a skein of yarn that is this size, so pretty small, I would only add maybe 10 to 20 drops of food coloring. But
this size, it was not exact. Oh my gosh.
Since, but I want a darker color, so I've added more. The nice thing about dyeing yarn yourself is that if the color that you get is too light, you can always add more food coloring to it and let it sit in the dye bath longer to get a darker color.
Of course, there's a limit to how much color you can add.
Okay, the dye bath is simmering and it's time to add the yarn. Gently
Is the camera gonna fall off?
squeezing the yarn out of
No.
The bath where it was sitting, and plop, there it goes into the dye bath. You can see, immediately you see some blue color, but that hasn't actually stuck to the yarn. It needs to have some time with the heat.
The yarn is so scrunched up in the center of the pot. I wish that I would lay it in a way that it could float a little bit more, which it's not a huge deal, but you will get a better, more even color coverage if you have it a little more spread.
In order to absorb. I should mention that you should not stir the yarn while it's in the pot. You can gently move it and check it with a spoon or fork, but if you stir the pot, you risk felting the yarn and ending up with a big blob at the end.
You'd have to really stir it a whole lot. You can definitely stir it some, but I already covered that.
So we'll now let this simmer until the dye bath has lightened. The dye bath has now cleared considerably.
So I have almost no memory of filming this. I have very little memory of just what went into doing this back then. What I could gather from watching this right here is that I was confused. Why didn't it clear? Because I added way too much dye. There is, at some point, a limit of how much dye your yarn can absorb. And a non-superwash yarn like this one is going to absorb less dye than a superwash yarn.
You can see how the water is looking significantly less navy.
That is true.
I am going to turn off the heat and let the dye bath cool to a temperature where I can handle the yarn comfortably. You can see that most of the dye has now cleared, and I am going to take our deep blue yarn and place it in the sink in some lukewarm water with...
I think we now know this is the same day as before.
some mild soap. And gently, without a ton of agitation...
That was a lot of
clean the
soap.
water. Now you will wash the yarn until the water runs clear, which means that there's no longer, that all the dye that is with the yarn has adhered to it. And then after that, we can hang it up to dry, and congratulations. With the help of me, Rebecca from ChemKnits.
Hey, you know what you see right here? You can see a little bit down, like in that corner, of course not when I'm moving it, but you can see a little bit of the, like, I think it's a Gorilla Pod. It's like a flexible tripod. You can like hook it onto a railing and stuff. That's what I was using to film.
And my friends at allfreeknitting.com, you have successfully dyed yarn with food coloring.
And I didn't show the finished dry yarn. Aww. Aw, poor me. Oh, what fun though. Oh my gosh. I don't really remember making the videos themselves, but I remember some things that happened after the fact. I remember a lot of like, this doesn't work. And I'm like, well, what yarn are you using? And someone used acrylic yarn or someone used cotton yarn and didn't have good results. And so getting comments and direct feedback like that made me think, I guess, a little bit more carefully about making sure to say, don't do this on acrylic or cotton, because that isn't something that I included in the videos. Now, could I make my videos shorter, like 5-10 minutes? Maybe, but it's harder now because I think I also editorialize things a little bit more. Back when I started, I didn't think there was any reason for me to do a video that was similar to something I had done before, because I was like, well, I've already done a tutorial. You've already seen that. But now when I make videos and share it, sometimes it's about the tutorial, but most of the time it's about the journey. It's about the process and what I have learned. But anyway, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. This is just brought to you from me, no other brands, and I really hope you enjoyed this slightly cringy look at some of my earliest videos. And I mean, overall, the techniques stand. I think more of what I could critique is how I'm making the videos versus entirely how I was dyeing the yarn. If you'd like me to do another video like this, looking back at an older episode, whether of Dye Pot Weekly or other really old ChemKnits video, maybe even trying to recreate some of them, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.